The United Healthcare Workers Union is proposing a new model for gig workers called the Cooperative Economy Act. We'll get back to that in a second, but first, a little context. We know that the recently passed California law AB 5 set new criteria for determining employment status. What this means is that most platform companies are now required to reclassify their gig workers as employees rather than independent contractors. Some platform companies have already begun to fight this legislation. We also know that gig workers have been hit hard by COVID-19 and that this crisis is shedding light on how employee misclassification and a lack of access to benefits and protections is directly hurting workers like you. So what we want to know from you is, would you want to join a worker cooperative owned and managed by gig workers themselves that would not only offer access to basic employment protections, but also would allow you and your colleagues to collectively negotiate with your employer? Worker cooperatives are just like any other business, except that they are jointly owned and democratically controlled by their employees. This means workers like you, and not just executives or outside investors, are in the driver's seat when it comes to decision-making and profit sharing. The Cooperative Economy Act would establish a new type of labor intermediary that connects workers and employers, much like a staffing agency called Cooperative Labor Contractor, or CLC. Instead of directly contracting individual workers, like the current gig economy model, platform companies would contract with a CLC that is collectively owned and operated by the workers, providing services to the platform company. By bringing workers together, CLCs would ensure that every worker enjoys full employment security and protections. It would give individual workers voting power and allow workers to unionize and collectively bargain. Business support services and financial resources would also become accessible through the statewide CLC Federation. So why would the platform companies participate? The Cooperative Economy Act would offer potential trade-offs to incentivize platform companies to contract with CLCs instead of directly with individual workers. For example, the CEA would automatically allow platform companies that employ workers through CLCs to be in compliance with AB 5. Also, instead of holding the platform companies liable for how you're paid or your safety, the CLC would take on that responsibility. That means removing company liability for things like minimum wage, overtime, or safety laws. It doesn't mean you won't get these things. It just means it would fall under the purview of the CLC. Platform companies could also be freed from handling business requirements, such as scheduling and reimbursements for work expenses. We've seen worker cooperative models work well in various industries all across the world. One example is the Cooperative Home Care Associates. With over 2,300 worker owners providing home health care services across New York City, they receive an above-average wage and are guaranteed a minimum of 30 hours work per week. Plus, they have family health insurance and membership in the SEIU labor union. In Spain, the Mondragon Corporation is a network of cooperatives composed of over 75,000 worker owners. The highest paid worker makes only 5 times as much as the lowest paid worker, compared to the US, where a CEO makes 278 times more than a worker. But things can go wrong when workers don't have democratic control. In agricultural work, for example, the labor contracting model has historically been used by employers to exploit vulnerable workers. We can also look to the taxi industry in Los Angeles, where the cooperative model has been standard since the late 1970s, but functions as a complex system of worker and corporate ownership that some critics argue is cooperative in name only, and ultimately pits drivers against one another. The goal of the Cooperative Economy Act, however, is to avoid these outcomes by bringing together the worker cooperative model and the labor contracting model, alongside unionization and collective bargaining, in order to ensure worker control in staffing and workplace decisions. Tell us what you think.